Well folks, this is it. This is gonna be the true finale of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly adventure by experiencing the final birthday scrapbook, just like in a console version of the game. Hey, what's up ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Pac-Man here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly adventure for the Game Boy Advance version of the game. So, last time, we've essentially did manage to completely done everything for the sake of the forms of Eeyore's birthday, and oh no, we actually did that okay enough as it is. So yeah, that's as far as I can try to say about that, I guess. So today, ladies and gentlemen, as I said this before, today is going to be the true finale in terms of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly adventure for the Game Boy Advance version of the game. Because of this though, we're about to go on to the final birthday scrapbook, and this time we're going to Pooh's birthday scrapbook. So because of that though, this means no matter what though, this will be the final time for not only collecting certain honey pots, but it's also about the fact that we're going to be playing as multitude of characters for the final time, ranging from Piglet, Tigger, and Eeyore, including Pooh himself. So yeah, as a result, no matter what though, I can't even believe we're actually getting very close towards the end of this though, basically. So, anyway, a few things I want to talk about this, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 20th of April today, in some cases in 2024 today, and as you probably already know, ever since enjoying the forms of it yesterday, that recently, Maxi has now recently finished up everything for the likes of the majority of the Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. And what I've noticed is that the actual quality, as well as the views count, goes by a little bit better than the forms of how it does it back in 2017. But that's just mainly because no matter what though, usually it only runs on the PlayStation 3 component cable. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that there was no issues for the sake of the forms of the actual commentary itself, and relatively speaking though, everything else goes all like fun and dandy and everything. So because of that though, yeah, I've got nothing more to add. So anyway, let's talk about the forms of another topic at this point, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, well, as you probably already know, is about the fact that I believe we've only got about 6 more days to go, or 7, depending on what region you lived in, but since we're in the UK right now, this means we have to wait until next week for the sake of the forms of Knuckles the series on Paramount Plus is going to be releasing soon. So because of that though, yeah, it's a bit of a bummer to me though, but I was expecting to able to watch it during the forms of on Friday, but as it turns out, I did manage to double check. Not only for certain photos they did somehow bring in during the forms of the London premiere for the likes of Knuckles the series, but it's also with the forms of the entire description information as well. And as it turns out, I did somehow found out that yes indeed, I have to wait until next week until that particular series is finally going to be releasing. So because of that though, bit nuisance to me though, but I'm sure I can able to be wait for that. So either way, and as a matter of fact though, is about the fact that I've noticed something about this as well. Sadly to tell you for this point, especially noticeable if you are still the bronies out there, to be more specifically if you are a huge fan of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic content when it comes to not only fans, but as well as the forms of some other stuff as well. Unfortunately though, Hasbro has strikes back again, which means no matter what though, Hasbro is once again trying to able to actually take down certain copyright videos, and it's just pretty ridiculous. Like, it does kind of reminds me of the forms of the 10 years ago syndrome all over again, since in 2014, which I can totally see why about the fact that back in 2020, that we were originally trying to able to do a video dedicated to the 20th anniversary of Friendship is Magic series, but of course, no matter what though, the copyright is about to upon us. So because of that though, I felt it was a little bit too strict for my honest opinion for that particular system as far as this is concerned, but regardless of everything else though, that's as far as I can try to think about it. So as far as I'm aware, it's about the fact that there's also worth noting for is that recently, Mortal Kombat 1 has recently revealed an April 2024 patch update, Well, I was gonna able to go for this entire list, but as a result, I can probably think about the forms of the Nintendo Switch version specifically. Like, it did mention about 3 things for the Nintendo Switch version itself. Like, for instance, they fixed a issue where they fixed visual issue where Liu Kang's hair would clip through his headband, and they also fixed color of certain palettes for smoke, and finally fixed an issue causing a soft lock during the forms of KOTH matches. So is it like King of the Hill mode? Which I think that's what it says anyway. Well, despite the fact I still haven't exactly looked upon that much information for the likes of Mortal Kombat 1 since about a couple of days ago. So because of that though, yeah, I may be biased, I guess. So, as you can tell, we're now gonna be playing as Tigger for the final time in this version of the game. And as it turns out, we still have to able to be very careful not to get caught by the forms of not only a bunch of Heffalumps and Wurzels, but also with the forms of other stuff as well. So because of that though, and as you can tell, we somehow revealed the actual item we can now able to actually use, so that way we can able to actually access to the rabbit's garden. So now we can able to do just that. So anyways though, and yes, if you're probably wondering about the fact that yes indeed, that we did see ND World just recently for about 3 days ago, presumably speaking, and I'm afraid to tell you, it's really disappointing again. I will have to admit it though right away, it's nothing that exciting to me anymore in regards to the forms of the majority of the ND World presentations. I mean, sure, some of these stuff looks very promising enough. Like, for instance, it's about the fact I should probably, get those specific stuff out the way while I was still able to actually be able to try and collect some more honey pots and stuff like that. Before we mentioned about the forms of that particular ND World announcements they did somehow bring, I just want to classify for that particular quick update in regards to the forms of not only for it's yet another anniversary thing that just happened since in about a couple of days ago, but it's also with the forms of one of those specific games has sadly been delayed until in August this year, specifically the 2nd of August. So, and relatively speaking, when it comes to the forms of one of those games in particular called World of Goo 2, basically that game is going to be delayed until the 2nd of August in 2024, because it was originally going to be able to release during at some point on May 23rd, but of course that's been pushed back until 3 months. So because of that though, yeah, it's a little bit of a nuisance though. But I'm sure enough though, it's about the fact I'm sure that World of Goo fans will be able to be looking forward to the most highly anticipated sequel. Whilst usually, relatively speaking, no, not for me anyway though, it's not my type of genre of games I always attempt to play. So, speaking of something games related though, for those of you probably wondering, whatever happened to the forms of the other Let's Plays that we usually did do back in ages ago? Well, to be more specifically, is that I used to able to like do some Let's Plays ranging from New Super Mario Bros. 2, Sonic Generations for the 3DS, alongside with Sonic Lost World for the 3DS. Well, if you're probably wondering where these videos are now, well, basically though, those particular playthroughs no longer showed up. Mainly because, while looking back on it right now, especially noticeable, we're still on 2024 right now, I will say the quality is pretty horrendous, and relatively speaking though, I can still able to keep, specifically, both Mario Party Island Tour as well as Mario Party Star Rush Let's Plays, because those Let's Plays are fun enough as it is, and in addition to that though, with the forms of both Mario Kart 7, alongside with the forms of Mario Party the Top 100, that, I will say that those particular qualities of those playthroughs is actually fun enough as it is, despite the fact that it's not the best quality in the world, but I'm sure it'll do justice. So because of that though, and relatively speaking though, as you can see, that this is going to be the final time we're going to be playing as Eeyore, because relatively speaking though, just like in the console version of the game, that if we try to able to get that specific key, obviously that particular crows or the birds decides able to steal the key for us. So naturally speaking, what I thought was a little bit weird is that we need to catch about 3 of those birds specifically. So again, it's kind of strange, but regardless of such, we able to actually get ourselves a glorious key after all. So Now, if you guys are probably wondering about the fact that, yes, I've already mentioned about this before, since in last Saturday or something like that. Basically, though, it's about the fact that I don't think it's possible for me to actually decide able to tackle through time attack mode playthrough of this game, because no matter what though, you go through the exactly the same stages as before, except you're on a time limit. And relatively speaking though, nothing different has happened about it, especially noticeable because if you dare manage to complete one of those time attack challenges in any of those stages in particular, they're just for bragging rights, and you get yourselves a nice message, and that's literally all there is to it. Because unlike the forms of how it does it on the console version, at least you can able to actually go back into the forms of the previous stages as you want. Like for instance, you can able to actually go ahead and try to able to actually get the remaining music notes until you're able to actually unlock certain music for your liking. And on top of all that stuff though, you can still able to actually collect some more honey pots if you haven't discovered them yet. And unlike the Game Boy Advance version on the other hand, all those honey pots will respawn, and relatively speaking, there's nothing else to it. So because of that though, yeah, that's the reason why I'm just gonna have to be honest here. I don't feel like it's gonna be possible to able to show off the time attack mode in this game. So, oh well, beggars can't be choosers, I guess, but that's just me anyway. So, anyway, so in terms of the forms of how the fact that recently, during the forms have been a couple of days ago, that as it turns out that in a year in 2009, do you guys even remember there was actually that particular episode in SpongeBob SquarePants, specifically in Season 6, in some cases the pretty bad season in my opinion, but one of those episodes in particular called SpongeBob vs. the Big One, where basically though it does manage to feature a voice talent with the forms of Johnny Depp, that basically though, it just managed able to come across into the big wave, which as a result, yeah, that particular episode alone has recently became 15 years old. So yeah, time flies, doesn't it? Especially noticeable, I believe that Mario as well as Sonic did somehow tell me something, that basically we used to have the actual DVD release of SpongeBob versus the Big One, but unfortunately though we no longer have it, mainly because I will admit it though right away, I'm honestly not a big fan of the majority of Season 6 for the sake of the forms of the SpongeBob SquarePants seasons variety, because no matter what though, I still prefer Season 1 all the way up to 3, and that's all there is to really think about it, because relatively speaking though, certain plot details have been recycled, just like the forms of how it does it on The Simpsons sometimes. Like, I totally get it about the forms of that massive competition or something like that, or perhaps even maybe because the actual writers has been replaced or something. Well, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point, because I already know for a fact it's been about quite a few days ago since we've mentioned something relates to SpongeBob or The Simpsons for that matter. So, either way though, yeah, that's what I can really think about it. So, anyway, and as you can tell, we're now going back onto the forms of a snowy mountain environment ever since during the forms of Antigo's birthday, except now, we can able to actually do some more stuff here and there. Like, for instance, there is now a spider web that we can't able to actually burn down with this just yet, unless we do need to acquire a candle, just like in a console version of the game. So obviously we now need to backtrack for a bit, and before we get onto that though, we need to collect some more honey pots in the process, so just in case we can able to actually get everything else out of the way. So yeah, it seems kind of obvious about the forms of this whole entire process of this entire playthrough as far as this is concerned. So, but relatively speaking though, also is about the fact that, well, I've noticed something already though, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, when it comes to the forms of other things worth noting for, is that we actually got ourselves some brand new screenshots, as well as other playable characters are coming for the likes of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero game. And those 4 playable characters in questioning, which there are Lord Beerus from the likes of in the Dragon Ball Z, the Battle of the Gods movie, as well as the forms of the rest of the Dragon Ball Super episodes. In addition to that though, there was also Wiz, and there's also going to be Future Gohan, just like in Budokai Tenkaichi 3. And on top of that, Fidel, she's also going to be in it. So, yeah, it seems pretty awesome to me though, especially noticeable about the fact that hopefully exponentially, they're trying to able to add it in some more even more playable characters for the majority of the forms of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. I will say that the entire character roster is going to be pretty massive as it is, so at least potentially speaking out, we're able to, well, mention more about it until for later, because, yeah, I will admit it though right away, I apologize for my comment take is a little bit awkward sometimes. That's just mainly because, as we expected, I ate too many packed dots recently, and on top of that, that actually caused my belching to exist. So I know it's incredibly gross if you ask me. So either way, so now we can able to actually proceed to this point right here. So now we can able to actually hopefully try to meet up with Piglet, and relatively speaking, this is going to be the final time to able to actually play as Piglet throughout the majority of this whole entire version of the game. And yeah, I will just go to say this right now. For my final thoughts of this version of the game already, I will have to admit it though, I was a little bit slightly disappointed with this version. Although, don't get me wrong, it is alright I guess, but it's just about the fact that, well, I honestly do prefer the console version of the game over the likes of the handheld version, because obviously the actual same exact issues I have with Piglet's Big Game on the Game Boy Advance version that is, that's basically those that, again, the depth perception is not the greatest, especially noticeable it takes place in the top-down perspective, which, gotta think about it has the exact same solution as the forms of how it does it for the likes of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories for the Game Boy Advance, but aside from all that stuff though, and also, I feel like that the actual visuals in this version of the game is fine, but it's just about the fact that I honestly still prefer the console version a lot more, just because of all that lighting and all that stuff, but that's just me. So either way, now we can play as Piglet for the final time, as I said this before, so naturally it's about time we can now able to scare off the last batch of those Heffalumps and Woozles around in this area, specifically Sporty Woozle right here, since in Piglet's Big Game. So of course, just like before, if you stay there for too long, then obviously though, that Sporty Woozle will switch the controls around. So yeah, that's basically all he does, just like in the console version, including Piglet's Big Game. So, and aside from all that stuff though, that's as far as we can able to come across it to at some form or another. Well, there might be one last enemy we can able to take care of, so I wonder where that could... Oh, wait a second, we have to take down this little thing right here, so... Okay, I was not expecting that, especially noticeable because despite the fact I got distracted by the forms of what is going on recently, but aside from all that stuff though, it's probably best if we let someplace else we're able to mention about the forms of some more stuff later on, specifically with the forms of certain announcements they did bring for the likes of the most recent ND World, or should I say, once again a disappointing part when it comes to the forms of Nintendo Direct presentations in my eyes, because, well, spoiler alert, unfortunately though, still no sign of the forms of not only Hollow Knight Silk Song, but also no luck with the forms of the Switch version's release of the forms of Shantae Advanced Risky's Revolution, so... yeah, it seems a bit of a bummer though, especially noticeable. I totally get it about the fact that they're trying to bring out new titles to the mix, or specifically some brand new titles for the likes of the majority of 2024 made by third-party developers, which I'm pretty darn sure that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that it looks like that third-party supportive titles is basically taking over for the likes of the brand new games we'll be releasing during that specific time. So yeah, that's what I was expecting for this point right there. So anyway, so let's see if we can able to use this particular shuffle and try to dig out the X and somehow receive the treasure map. So now we can able to find the glorious treasure chest. But before we get that particular treasure chest, we need to talk to Al. So just in case we can able to once again go into this particular icy cavern section, just in case we can able to actually take care of the last few bits here and there. So, and aside from all that stuff though, that's as far as I can try to say about this. I mean, relatively speaking though, there's also another issue I have with the forms of this version of the game in particular. That's of course the lack of save options. To be more specifically, because obviously like I said this before, this game still utilizes passwords, and I will admit it though also, the music I will admit though, it's not great to me though, especially noticeable it's a little bit limited compared to the forms of how it does it in not only for Piglet's Big Game, but also with the majority of the Game Boy Advance games on top of that. So that's just me anyway though, but that's just mainly because of its handheld limitations. So because of that though, yeah, I was a little bit slightly disappointed with the music as well as the presentation. So yeah, that's as far as I can say about it. So, but regardless of such though, folks, is that we're nearly at the end of this particular, not only for its birthday stage, but also with the forms of this entire, oh come on, really? Oh my god, the depth perception is not great, especially noticeable because again, you have to be dang close, and also you need to be directly centered until you're able to use that item. So, speaking of items though, this will actually brings us to the final item we can use, and that's what appears to be none other than the candle. So now we can able to actually burn down the forms of that particular ginormous spider web before we're able to actually deal with the final puzzle in this whole entire game, specifically not only on the console version but also on the Game Boy Advance version as well, so that way we can able to lit up the forms of those specific candles before we're able to actually get ourselves with the grand prize. So yeah, everything else will become to expect at this as some form or another. So, and generally speaking, I was about the fact that when it comes to the forms of other things I would like to mention, well, honestly, folks, aside from the fact that there's also another thing I want to point out as well, with that particular upcoming movie called Gladiator 2, you know, with that 24-year long-awaited sequel to the original Gladiator, well, as it turns out, when it comes to the forms of specific details about the forms of Gladiator 2, it did somehow mention this, that it's going to set 20 years after the first film, and on top of all that stuff though, there's also some other actors I can probably think about on top of my head, but unfortunately though, I have nothing else to say about that, I guess. So, and as you can see, this is the final time we're going to be sending off those bees, so that way we are basically done when it comes to able to be sending some honey pots to these bees. And relatively speaking though, we've collected every single honey pot throughout the majority of this version of the game. So all we need to do now is of course do this one last part, that's what appears to be lit up those candles. So again, you have to be fast, so just in case you can able to successfully try to able to get that golden treasure chest, and that'll be it basically. Now before we grab that treasure chest, I just want to make sure if I don't miss anything. But aside from that though, we are done. So yeah, once again, just like the console version of the game, inside of this chest, it obviously contains a whole bunch of honey pots. So that'll make Winnie the Pooh very, very happy. Especially noticeable because, you know, he loves honey so much. So, understandably so anyway. So yeah, it's the most delicious ever. So, once you're done with that, then we get ourselves a nice little ending where I'm pretty sure the ending plays out exactly like the console version of the game, despite the fact that for whatever reason, is that you guys even remember back on the Game Boy Advance version of Piglet's Big Game, that one of those pictures they did show is that everyone else is all gathered around having picnic and all that. Well, guess what this particular version of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly and Tumbly adventure do manage to bring back? Well, as soon as we're able to actually go ahead and skip the actual dialogue, although I was originally trying to able to read all this, but you probably already know about the forms of how the ending plays out to be, aside from the fact that, well, obviously it's like a picture slideshows and stuff like that. Yeah, that screenshot right there is exactly identical to Piglet's Big Game on the Game Boy Advance. So yeah, no re-edits or none of these new stuff added in, so it's basically the exactly same image as before. So yeah, it seems kind of lazy to me. Well, that pretty much summed up as the forms of my, you know, my final thoughts of this particular version of the game. Honestly, folks, I was a little bit disappointed with this version of the game. I mean, sure, it's not bad, it's just that, again, like I said before, I do prefer the console version of the game any day, especially concerning for the fact that, well, I will say this right now, is that I think you should probably give this version a pass. I will have to be honest here, especially noticeable because, well, it definitely takes a few steps forward in terms of the forms of progression, especially certain stages goes by a lot quicker than the console version of the game because the forms of the lack of loading times, and on top of that, the lack of cutscenes was actually plays out. So because of that though, yeah, you're not missing this much, especially noticeable because, well, it is great that I can able to experience this version of the game again, according to the forms of how the fact that when Sonic did somehow mention about this so many times in the past. But aside from that, while looking back on it though, I felt a little bit disappointed with this version of the game. I have to be brutally honest here, but then again, I'm biased when it comes to playing games on consoles rather than on handhelds. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can still able to play some good games on handhelds, but it's just that when it comes to some other games though, it just feels a bit, you know, not really the same as the forms of the console version of the game. Like, obviously, no matter what though, this version of the game, you know, doesn't seem to able to have not only multiplayer for its minigames mode, but it's also they missing the forms of the music player mode, and on top of that, there's no junior mode either, so yeah, that's a little bit, a bit of a bummer to me though, but aside from that, the entire credit sequence looks exactly very similar to the forms of Piglet's Big Game, I just realized, except, well, the actual creators is actually now different as opposed to the, well, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, hope you guys do enjoyed this particular playthrough of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure for the Game Boy Advance version, and relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I at least able to actually commit it, to able to appreciate, able to actually tackle for this version of the game right now. So, generally speaking, I would able to actually just try to able to play something else instead of this. So, but that's just me anyway though. I do apologize with the forms of a lot of ranting recently, because then again, we'll let someplace else will mention more about it. So this is me, Pac-Man, from the likes of Maxi Toys, and until then, until tomorrow anyway, we should probably do a bit of a mini Let's Play of any sorts, but I can't tell you exactly what this is just yet, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.